In your article that I mentioned earlier, but again, the title was Capturing Advanced Human Cognitive Abilities with Deep Neural Networks. You begin with the question, how can artificial neural networks capture the advanced cognitive abilities of pioneering scientists? And first off, I guess this sort of reflects some earlier questions that I've asked you, but I'm wondering whether you personally are interested in this more as a technical design problem, or whether your curiosity stems from a more practical interest, such as the advancement of civilization, maybe by having AI on the cutting edge of research, or, as you said earlier, because of your interest in the cognitive phenomena in humans that are at stake?
Well, I think that's a great question. I feel like, first of all, it is true that my own fundamental interest is in understanding human capabilities and how to understand how we've been able to achieve the things that we have as a species, or even how individuals have been able to achieve the things that they have as individual scientists. And, Rumelhart is one of the people who I think about because I knew him very well. But I also think about Newton, Einstein, Darwin, as well. Many things are written about all of those three people, and so you could spend a lot of time reading about how people have thought about how they think. They thought, I should say. And also, though, I reflect on the deep learning systems that, were beginning to come out toward the end of last year, like ChatGPT in its initial incarnation that came out in November, and other things that had come out before that. So I was actually writing that paper in the run-up to the release of ChatGPT, of GPT-3. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if GPT-4 made an even bigger splash for me because it was stronger than the predecessors in ways that began to make me feel like, maybe, well, for me, the biggest splash was GPT-4, but I wrote this paper in I guess I wrapped it up right when GPT-3 came out in November, which was, I guess, the biggest splash for OpenAI. Anyway, those models seem to be interesting in that they exhibit capabilities that have led these AI companies to fall all over each other in thinking that they've actually just about solved the problem of intelligence. And on the one hand, but leave one feeling a little bit less, leave me anyway, feeling a little bit like something's missing here to me. And I want to think more about what it is. I think the answer that I think of when I think about this question is sort of feeds back into the way I pose the question in a way. But the answer is, I feel like what's missing is this incredible sense of purpose and goal-directedness that people like Darwin and Newton and Rumelhart in a couple of instances clearly exhibited. So on Newton's tombstone, it apparently says, by dint of the power of unprecedented power of concentration or thought or something along those lines. I can't remember exactly the quote. He did all of the following things. This man focused his mind with an intensity that nobody else could kind of fathom, right?
And to use concentration as a word to apply to something like ChatGPT just seems like a category error.
I guess, yeah. Well, it's interesting to think so, and maybe to chat about what you think that means. I guess what I mean is having a sense of purpose that you're working, toward, that you come back to day after day, and you sort of like, systematically organize your behavior towards finding pathways towards the solution. And maybe you go down a dead end for 6 months or something like that. I don't know, but there's a sense of like focus and direction towards a goal. And I feel like, even very young children can be extremely goal directed. They, 2-year-olds are extremely difficult to control. They get in their minds goals and like certain kinds of things that they want to do, and they just insist on pursuing them. And you have, they become somewhat uncontrollable because their self-directedness kind of takes over. And it's only through a lot of acculturation and further, development that they begin to be able to sort of channel those goals into ways that sort of work together constructively with those of other people. So I think of humans as intrinsically goal-directed, and one of the things that I myself have been thinking about recently is how to go from relatively primitive goals, like seeking nourishment when we're hungry or warmth when we're freezing, to more advanced goals that are defined in terms of like discovering basic scientific principles or achieving equity for all the people who live in a subcontinent like India, for example. These goals are probably not intrinsic as such, but somehow that goal directedness that might be intrinsic can get structured towards creating a kind of pro-social agency, or in other cases, quite destructive kinds of agency, at least from the perspective of those who are not part of your particular gang of thugs. But in any case, this goal-directedness is very central to who we are. And I'm not sure, as I think about it, to what extent it's a good idea to build too much of that into artificial systems. We want them to be tools for our agreed upon social goals, not self-directed agents. So I think there's issues there that need to be considered carefully. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but I think for me, it's more about understanding the differences and where the issues are that need to be carefully considered, that I raise these issues.
Mm-hmm. Just to go back to what I said at the outset of your response, what I meant by concentration is, I guess, attention to a single task and not the sort of larger structured concentration that you've just been indicating, maybe like a sort of doggedness. But because when you ask ChatGPT a question, it just answers it. So I think it pays attention to that question. But of course, it's lacking the sophistication to formulate a multi-pronged strategy of the sort that you're indicating. And I also totally understand and empathize with your hesitation to endow too much of this ability in an artificially intelligent organization.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the ChatGPT certainly, as of end of November 22, basically was a autoregressive generator of text strings that could sometimes produce apparently coherent stuff, but ultimately had several shortcomings. But even then, they had begun to fine-tune it with instruction to follow instructions. And that begins to move it more towards a purposive kinds of approach. But even then, you could say, well, it's just part of the context string. It's not really a true purpose. And whether that's true or not, and what it would mean for it to be a true purpose beyond being part of the context, is an open question. And a lot of work is being done at Google and OpenAI with various ways of thinking about how best to structure prompts and how best to, organize fine-tuning activities around encouraging the model towards the idea that it should think carefully through a problem and decompose it into a hierarchical set of sub-problems in a way that begins to seem much more purposive, goal-directed, and controlled by an overall plan or goal. And so that is definitely where a lot of work is currently being focused, and where I feel like we're going to be learning quite a lot in the next couple rounds of releases of AI systems about how systematic and organized and coherent they can become around working towards solving specific tasks. So I think the jury is, the future is going to hold a lot of new developments, and I think it'll be interesting to see what they turn out to be.